The number 2 pick is in. The Charlotte Hornets, Michael Jordan having the final say before he sells his stake in the team, and they selected Alabama's Brandon Miller, 6'9", 200 pounds, led D1 freshman in points per game and threes last season, 4th player in the last 50 years to lead the SEC in scoring as a freshman. His head coach at Alabama, Nate Oates, said, quote, "I don't think you can put a position on him. He's 6'9", a player that can do everything, looking to complement LaMelo Ball in Charlotte." There were questions that why they would take Brandon Miller alongside LaMelo Ball. Well, they want him. They want a guy that can shoot the basketball. This makes sense in terms of what they want to do. A franchise that really has been irrelevant for a long time, and now Brandon Miller headed to the Charlotte Hornets. Adam, your reaction?
Well, I think it's a unique combination of size and shot making. 6'9" wing. Nate Oates doesn't want to call him a wing. I'm okay calling him a wing. And he has a very good mid-range game, too. We didn't see that at Alabama because Nate Oates is very tied to the statistical metrics of the game, doesn't like mid-range shots. But in high school, Miller was someone who did the vast majority of his damage in the mid-range area. What we have not seen yet is his ability to pressure the rim. In fact, he finished at a very low rate. He's somewhat older for a college freshman, so the fact that he's still so lean is a little bit of a question mark. And then, of course, there are the off-the-court questions that came up this year and continued through the interview process, quite frankly. As far as a grade, I think I would probably go with an A- just because of the way this whole process went. If this really came down to fit or really came down to a 1-on-0 workout on Monday, that is not the way you determine who should be the number 2 overall pick. You make this determination based on who you think is the best long-term prospect. History is not going to care about who is the better fit next to LaMelo Ball. They are only going to care about who is the better player. I don't know whether Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller is going to be the best player. For me, this is an A- instead of an A, only because of the way the process was handled.
I tell you what, what's fascinating is Brandon Miller says, MJ's not my GOAT. Then he does another interview on Wednesday and says, I saw Jordan airball a free throw. I'll have that over him forever. Whatever. He's just old. So I can't help but think that Brandon Miller had either a certain level of confidence on the down low that he knew this was happening, or he ticked off Jordan so much that he left him no choice but say, I got to draft this kid, because the last time I saw someone, wired like this was me 40 years ago. In talking to people around the league, just telling you, those I talked to, Eastern Conference, Western Conference, more people preferred Scoot Henderson. But Miller going to the Hornets, can he be, and we will see, maybe he can he be the kind of player that actually changes in a tangible, meaningful way the direction of the franchise? Some people I've spoken to, and this isn't just this week, this goes back to even when Miller was playing at Alabama, some people have some skepticism if he actually is a true alpha that can take on that role, that can be a all-star, all-NBA caliber player. The potential is there, but quite clearly, Mitch Kupchak and outgoing owner Michael Jordan saw enough with Miller, loved the shooting, that they see him as the ideal wing and someone to complement LaMelo Ball as opposed to the more dynamic playmaker with more all-star potential all-star potential in Scoot Henderson right behind him.
Perhaps he said Paul George was his GOAT because that's the comp you gave him.
It is the comp.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, I want to continue to build my brand.
But to Matt's point, these comments that we saw in the media, behind closed doors, these are the kind of comments he's been making in interviews for the last 6 weeks. And so when he said that in the media yesterday, I'm sure your phone did the same thing as mine. It was like, you should have heard what he said in the interview. Right. And given the issues that happened at Alabama this year, given the concerns, you should be prepared to interview better. You should be prepared to handle the media better. This is a guy who didn't go through the normal pre-draft process because he had mono. All he should have been doing is preparing for interviews and preparing for media availability.
So then if you're the Charlotte Hornets, then you need some major PR with Brandon Miller to get him ready for the NBA. Because are you saying a lot of the stuff is between the ears with him in terms of what's on the court? Because that's what we saw at Alabama last season.
I'm saying there's a pattern that is somewhat concerning. And it's not, you expected him to be fully prepared handling. He hadn't spoken to the media really. You expected him to be totally drilled on what to say. There's no player in this draft who should have been more prepared to handle the media than Brandon Miller. I think we can all agree to that. And he wasn't. So that just leads you to say, well, why not? What's the disconnect there?
Certainly some questions surrounding Brandon Miller, but he is headed to the Charlotte Hornets.